Well, it's time for part 2 on this Suzuki LT230S. So this is where I left off, pulled the motor on it. So if you saw my previous video, you know what happened. If you didn't see it, go back and watch it. But bought this one, seller said the motor's locked up. Sure enough, it was. Ended up being the cylinder, or the piston was seized down in the cylinder. And then the crankshaft rod bearing was seized as well. So we've got some parts in it for now. We're on hand now, so we're going to pull this motor apart and get this thing back together. So at the moment, it's sitting over here with all the other stuff. A couple projects I still need to get some time to work on, as well as my Tri-Z, which is partially locked up, and my TRX 250R back there. I think has maybe got a hole in the piston because that one spins over way too easy at the moment. So yeah, let's get this motor pulled apart and see if we can put it back together in running condition again. So here's the motor that came out of it. This piston was just rusted. Basically, I found out that the muffler and the pipe had some water down in it still, and this was all just seized into the cylinder, as well as the rod bearing down in there is seized as well. So we've got some new parts for it. So I was on eBay. I found a really nice used crankshaft. Not really much for new stuff, and doesn't really warrant the budget on this project. So this crankshaft seems totally fine, as well as I picked up technically a used cylinder, but it looks pretty much due. I mean, good cross hatching and stuff still. This is a high compression Wiseco piston, so you can see there a little more dome on it compared to the stock piston. So in theory, we should make a little more power. So we're going to start pulling this motor apart. We'll pull this stator cover side off first, I think, and start removing some stuff. Well, took off the first cover. Found my first surprise. So this bolt here came out a little easy, and that's kind of broken. So I'll have to figure out a way to kind of fix that. Not a super critical. Oh boy, what else we got going on here? What is it? Oop, focus there. I'm not sure what's going on here. If this is a bunch of JB Weld there or something. I don't know if we've got... Doesn't really seem to be cracked or anything there. Huh. Okay. There's definitely a lot of silicone on this, kind of sealing this up. Stator looks okay by appearance. Probably check that out too before I put it back together. Make sure everything's checking out there so we'll get spark. So this is that other side cover there. Just popped that off. And this is what we got back behind there. So that's kickstart mechanism, clutch, main drive, oil pump drive there and stuff. Shifting mechanism. So we're going to start pulling this stuff apart. See if we can get this case broken apart and get this crankshaft out of it. The clutch is removed here, so that's all right there. Basically the one big nut there, popped that off, as well as the little spring retainer screws there. Pulled that off. So here's kind of our main, actually that's a reduction gear for the Kickstarter. It looks like there's just a snap ring holding that guy on. We got our big nut there. Going on the crankshaft, a little E-clip holding the oil pump drive gear on. And yeah, I think this shift shaft should actually pull probably straight out this way as well. Well, we'll keep plugging away at this thing. Alright, this main gear popped off easy. There was one nut holding that on there, and then one gear that was located by this key, and the second gear back behind there was located by that pin there. So, and then shift return spring and shift spring just popped right out. There wasn't anything holding that on. It just slid out this way. So basically this is the little shift drum mechanism here. Looks like those Phillips head screws. I believe back behind here is probably a detent for the gear selector. These two gears and the oil pump I think I'm going to leave on there. I don't think there's anything on the back side of this case. We're going to leave it on there for the time being. Pop this off quick, and then we're going to tap on this case and see if this case cover pops apart. Got a little lucky here. So a little shift kind of mechanism that there's kind of like a, well, this is what it is here. So inside here, there's a couple springs, little pins, and then these guys grab onto that outer ring there, and this is what shifts that drum. I was popping that out, and they kind of exploded and shot everywhere. So be careful if you're doing that. luckily, found everything back there. Sometimes they stick together. Sometimes they like to pop apart. Okay, so I'm going to pull this detent off, and then we're going to smack this case a little bit and see if it separates. Just zipped all the screws out around the outer edges there. Gave it a couple taps, and we're starting to separate here. So I think we're going to be in business. We'll get this kind of spread apart here across there and get this outer side cover off. All right, the side cover came off. Actually came off the opposite way I thought it was going to, but all the transmission gears and everything stayed down in there. But at the very last minute, all of a sudden, like this case was just about off, and all of a sudden I heard a little spring release and it shot, and I heard it ting somewhere over there on the wall. And then that little shift fork and then this little guy here, both laying down in there, which this pin goes there. This shift fork catches onto there and grabs that guy there. This guy's also on this shaft. I believe this might be some sort of roller that locks down there. And I think this might have been like a little return spring that hooked on somewhere. So I'm going to have to look at the parts break down there and see what went flying and see what it's going to take to replace that. So this flywheel, this takes a puller that threads onto there, which apparently I don't have this one on hand. But since I'm not going to use this crankshaft at all, I'm just going to punch on that guy right there, drive that crankshaft out the backside. Should pop off this flywheel, and then we'll suck it back on later. So ideally I won't need a puller. Not the best way to do it, but it's going to work. All right, I figured out where those little pieces went. So this was that little roller. This is actually the detent mechanism for each gear. And then this was one of the shift collars. So that little detent that I pulled out on the back side down here was actually the detent for the forward and reverse selector switch there. And then this little hole there is going to be a little spring that attaches on that little peg right there. So we have to find a little spring that's going to work for that, because I don't think I'm going to find the original one. I know the general direction it shot off in, but wasn't a good corner for it to land in. Alrighty, crankshaft's out of there. So there's the old one. So I had that rod bearing completely stuck on this one. Flywheel popped off pretty easy. Just hit it like 3 times with a hammer and popped right off. Oops. That was almost bad. So, plan now is we're going to clean these cases out really good, get all this gasket material scraped off and everything and cleaned up, and install some new parts. I just cleaned out this side cover, and then looking at the transmission here, I'm going to have to pull these gears out. But the way that reassemble this, especially get this spring hooked back up and all this stuff, it's got to go from this side into this side first, and then put this side cover on last. So I'm going to pull the rest of those gears off. We're going to strip this fully down. Then we'll clean this case out as well. So I'll pop these gears off and start transferring transmission stuff over to this clean case side. Okay, the transmission gears and everything else is out. So here's all the main transmission gears, the little shift collars and stuff that shift back and forth between the different gears there. So we're going to transfer everything back over into the clean side. And I'm going to disassemble the rest of this stuff, clean all this sludge and stuff out of here, and keep putting it back together. Transmission gears are back in place. So this is that little guy that the spring launched off on me. So I'm going to find a spring that's going to go from there to there. And this is what it's just a little detent for the shift position there. So we'll do that. Then finish cleaning up this case and then throw a crankshaft back in it. And yeah, just start buttoning it back up. Oh, it's my lucky day. Look what's right there. That's the spring that launched. I figured there was no way I was going to find this thing. Funny story. See that C-clip or that snap ring up there? That's from a Sportsman front bearing, like a wheel bearing that was replacing. That thing sprung off and took me about, I don't know, 3 weeks before I found it up there. It's been up there for about a year now, but sometimes they just go in random spots. Transmission is all back in there. The cases are sealed back together and put back on. So we're gonna put the clutch back on and finish up putting all these gears back on this side, and then we'll work on that other side cover. Got this outer cover back on now, and we've got our kickstart going too. So that guy works as well. Clutch lever system's back installed. So basically I need to throw the flywheel back on this and this outer stator cover, and then run the cam chain up there, and we'll slap the new cylinder piston on and head and check some compression and stuff. Cylinder and piston are on now. We're going to work on this head here. This head, that exhaust valve, it's getting water through it, so I'm going to pull that exhaust valve out and clean it up and lap it, and hopefully that'll still seal okay, and then we're going to button that back up. And this is that exhaust valve. So we're going to clean this thing up, putting valve seal in here too, and it should work still. The valve is all cleaned up now. We've got the head back on. We're going to time this thing, so right there is our little top dead center timing mark. So we're going to install the camshaft now. Actually, we're going to torque the head stud bolts down. Then, yeah, we'll throw the camshaft in and then put this valve cover back on. Alrighty, our motor is all back together. So, it's time to go back into the chassis. So let's put it in there, and then we're going to get this thing to run pretty soon. The motor is back in place. Oh, it's always such a nightmare and a puzzle trying to wiggle these things back in where they're supposed to be. So, we're going to check for spark. I sure hope there's spark. I'm going to feel a little defeated if we got this far and did all this stuff and then don't have spark. So let's see here. Got my kill switch on. Oh, it's sparking. I don't know. Can't hold the camera steady enough. Oh, there was a good spark. Sweet, we got spark. I think I'm gonna check compression quick on it too, and then we definitely need to go through this carb still. This gas was super gross in there, and I'm sure that's plugged up. So we'll do that, and then throw the pipe back on, and might be about ready to start. Oh boy, I'll take that for compression. 160 psi. That looks pretty darn good. Not sure where these motors are supposed to be, but that seems excellent. Alrighty, let's tackle this carb next. See what this looks like. Well, it's not completely green, but definitely looks pretty crappy in there. Oh yeah, I can take that back. That's pretty green. Okay, I'm sure these jets are plugged. Oh boy. Yeah, I think they're plugged. Okay, well, let's clean this thing out here too, and we're making progress on this thing. Got my carb all clean, reinstalled, just put the chain back on. I need to put this foot rest and then hook all the shifter linkage up and then the reverse lever there, and then put the pipe on, and then we are ready to try and start this thing. All right, this thing's ready to start. I just threw some gas in it. We're gonna see if it does. Throw a choke on. Got it neutral there. Okay, let's see what it does here. Oh, no way, first kick. And it idles. Choke off. All right, let's let it warm up here a little bit. Put the choke back on. Alrighty, that runs good. We'll let it burn out all the smoke and stuff, and the oil that's out in there. Well, this is it. It's all ready. Back together, it runs and drives again. Honestly, it's a pretty peppy little machine. Kind of fun. like a great little kind of beginner four-wheeler for someone to learn on a manual clutch. It's really convenient. It's got reverse too. This thing's also gonna be for sale too. Let me know if you guys are interested, and please follow along for the next video and the next build.